In this video, we're going to hold an October 2024 10-minute Board of Directors meeting for Archi Demo Code. Take a front row seat as we work out what's going on and what we need to do next. So sit back, grab a cuppa, as George, Desley and I run through everything in the board meeting. Well, welcome to the boardroom, guys. It's Archi Demo's October 2024 10-minute board meeting with George Panos. Hello, George.
Hi, David.
And Desley White.
Hi,
how are you going, Desley?
George.
We had our last board meeting for September, where we discussed at length losing the High Street Yoga studio and the impact that was going to have on our full year forecast. As we know, we've won the Alice Road project and started that off, and that was sort of lucky because we're able to chuck a heap of people at that, and you'll see that when we go through the numbers, we've actually got a little bit ahead of that job. But yeah, we've still got this problem in the full year forecast. So sort of framework of going through, we'll have a bit of an accounts review quickly just to know where we're at and where things are going. And we sort of bind that together with the revenue forecast. And particularly there, we're going to be looking at the impact of High Street Yoga and what's going to save us. And I think we identified at the end of the last video that we've got the Cheap and Nasty Lawyers Interiors job, that if we win that, I think that will get us out of the hole. We haven't yet. It's still in there at a 50-50 probability. So we really want to get some feedback from our interiors director, Far Lap, on the staff schedule. Then we've got we'll run through our projects and we'll have a look at the work in progress and the utilisation, the multiplier and all the other KPIs. Okay, so October's been a pretty good month. You know, we're $25,000 or $26,000 better than net profit for the month. And that's because we've dug into the Alice Road project. Year to date's the same because we were bang on budget at the end of last month. So, you know, there's nothing in the year to date that's screaming out there's a problem. If we look at the capacity forecast at 2.8 multiplier and at our budgeted utilisation of 64%, we can still make $5 million in turnover. We've got the firepower here to do that. But our problem is that we don't actually have enough work in the pipe. And I think we've got to look at that and just determine whether we wind our expectations back. We're not going to be producing the actual, when I look at the full year forecast, this one here, we're $400,000 down, even with our weighted average for Cheap and Nasty Lawyers. Now, if we win Cheap and Nasty Lawyers, that's in there at 50-50, 1.5 million. That's actually going to chuck in about an extra $1.2 million worth in that period. And I've got concerns that we could even do that. So we don't want to verify, you know, is that the right fee? Is the timing right? Is the length of the job right? There's a lot of things we need to verify there because they've got a big impact on us and also with the skill set. But if I look at the rest of year forecast, I can work out that we're only going to be, if everything comes in as expected on our revenue forecast, we're only going to be producing at 2.4, which is around about break even for the rest of the year. So we've sort of got to, you know, from my point of view, we've got to make a decision around, and we've really got to try and work out, are we going to be making this $5 million or not? If we look at our KPIs for the month as well, the multiplier is at 2.78. So almost bang on what we're expecting. The debtor days, they're up a little bit, nothing to be concerned about, but there is a little bit of, in the debtors report, which we could have a look at separately, but there's a couple of things there we need to jump on, particularly if we're carrying a bit more WIP. Staff numbers, FTE, that's about what we expected. Utilisation's up a bit. You see there for October, it's at 71.8% against a budget of 64. So people have been working really hard to get into this Alice Road job. Fixed and variable overheads. The variable overheads were up a bit, but we've been through and done the variance analysis. We've adjusted the full year forecast for whatever it was, and let's just assume, you know, that it's that they're valid expenses, and it is what it is. And the cash isn't going quite as well as we thought because our debtors are building up a bit and our WIP is building up a bit. So, you know, we've still got over $1 million in the bank for the remainder of the year, but 1 million of that's on deposit, and we've got a term loan that we're paying that for the privilege of that. So we don't really want to touch it. That's almost like our buffer zone. So we'll try and stay out of there. But we go to the jobs. You can see here the big one there, Alice Road, and we've got $128,000 worth of WIP there. So we've spent 214 and only billed 130, and that's because we're jumping ahead into the program. Now, obviously, there's a bit of a risk here with this percentage complete figure. Sorry, this one here. And that should ultimately be supported by a cost to complete calculation for you to have full comfort that that's accurate. But last month we had 67 in WIP. It's gone up to 108, and that's because of this Alice Road. This could have a cash flow impact for us if we can't, if we continually need to keep getting ahead just to keep the people busy. We don't want to run out of cash, but we don't want people sitting around doing nothing either. Like I said, the most critical thing for us at the moment is probably working out what happens if we win cheaper nasty lawyers and what happens if we don't.
David, the issue for us is how many people are we going to carry over the Christmas period, and how much cash is that going to cost us moving forward, and do we actually need to make people redundant prior to Christmas? I think that's really the decision for the board today, is that clearly we're going to lose some really good people, and do we actually wait for the February period and hope that we do win another job and move the multiplier back up to 2.8, or do we keep the staff and basically make no money over the next 3-4 months and maybe go and lose some money?
I'll just jump in. After our last conversation, I went and had a look at the staff numbers, the longevity of the staff, so the service period. And I want to flag, in line of David's comment, or in line with David's comment about cash flow and your comments just now, George, if we are making people redundant before Christmas, it's the 8th of November today. We need to do that in November. I think it doesn't align with our values. It doesn't align with who we want to be as leaders, to make people redundant just before Christmas. So I think we need to look at that in November. And if we do that, the minimum payment we need to make, based on our people and based on the fact that we're not a small business, so we have to pay redundancy, the minimum payment is 2 months' pay. So if we're paying that in November, how many people can we afford to pay 2 months' pay to with cash flow? But also, end of November takes us through to the end of January. Like, we would be paying those people that amount until the end of January. Plus, there's the accrued leave that we would need to pay out. So I think we need to look at it through that lens as well. And I'll also pick up on David's comment just now, and I think we're all in violent agreement. Our people have been working super hard. David, your comment was people have been working really hard, and I think we need to look at what's the impact of that. If people work super hard, we're thrilled that they are, and then we go, and we're going to make you redundant. So we need to think of those things. If we are going to make people redundant, we also need to decide what are the skills we need into the future and who has those skills, rather than, I think we all agree, rather than looking at a last on, first off kind of situation. So there's some initial thoughts from me.
David, just one of the questions for me is, if everything doesn't work out and we're in the worst case scenario, are we going to be losing, say, $100,000 a month? I mean, are we able to quantify that loss? Because this is really now what we're doing.
Yeah, we'd be looking at $785,000 hole if that turns into nothing.
And over what time period would that be when we're looking 785? So are we going to be losing roughly $100,000 a month?
The impact is over the rest of the year. We're ahead of budget for now, right? So that $700,000 shortfall's coming off our rest of year. It's about $100,000 a month short. The full year, I can just do this sort of in my head, but the full year at the moment had us at 588 less 78, so we're probably going to lose money. we'll be a couple 100,000 down at the end of the year if the worst case happens and we don't adjust headcount.
Can I just put my risk manager hat on, or risk management hat on? David, you made a comment just before about a significant amount of unpaid overtime being done.
Yeah.
I actually think we really need to look at that and dig into that to make sure that we're not at risk of underpayment of people, to make sure that their annual salaries cover the additional hours that they've been doing when compared to the award, because if not, that's a huge risk to us as a business.
I don't know the answer to that one off the top of my head, Desley.
We need to do some numbers. Let's
I-
do some numbers on that, and we can see whether we're comfortable or not, because that also could impact decision making.
Yeah, my gut feeling is, we want to try and attract decent people, so we're probably paying above the award. The quantum of overtime in that last month wasn't alarming. It was significant, but it wasn't alarming. And I think, George, you've been in this game longer than me. When the project needs people, they generally seem to find them. And there'd have to be some sort of element of swings and roundabouts in it too, I'd imagine.
And we can do averaging of salaries and things like that under the award. We can do all of that. We just need to be confident in the data.
Yep.
So it's not that it's a massive issue necessarily, but we need to understand our data first.
Yep. Yep. And we can do that through the utilisation.
The issue for us on a profitability basis is that, does it mean that we're going to make less, or are we going to move into loss territory? So, are we, the $700,000 shortfall, what is that profit impact? And does it mean that we still make some money, or do we actually start losing money and start actually eating up at our cash? Because that will then that will allow us to make the decision. Because clearly, from a financial perspective, if we go into the red each month, say for example, we start losing from December, January, then we need to know that we're going to be burning cash. Or the other thing is that we're still going to be break even or a bit above, but we're just not meeting our targets.
Yeah, we've got reserves to keep us going in the red a little while, but we'd prefer obviously not to actually dig into it. But to me also, George, we lost High Street Yoga. That we had that down as a 50%, 100%, right? 100% going ahead, 50-50 chance of winning it, and we lost it, right? You'd think on the swings and roundabouts basis that if you had two 50-50s, you'd lose one and you'd win one. Probably just as likely that we're going to win this job. And I think that's going to present a whole, raft of other problems, because, if we thought we were busy in October, you wait till this job starts, especially if there's, some contractual terms like, time of the essence. And
so in one sense, if we're looking at what you've said, is that it's probably nearly worthwhile taking the risk of really minimising any redundancies and maybe just working through and speaking with the staff, because it seems like we're not in a drop dead situation. Is if we don't do it, then we're going to be deeply in the red and moving to insolvency. But this is again an interesting thing, is that what we've decided is that to make more cash in the down the track, or more profit, we're going to suffer a little bit of a downturn now. I think this is really where we're sitting at, is that, how can we minimize our little downturn, keep all the staff, if, as the numbers are showing, we've got enough cash reserves, but nevertheless, we're not going to make as much money if we actually just, did what we needed to do and make some redundancies, notwithstanding that, the opportunity cost of actually rehiring people. So I think that's the conundrum that we have. I think
this job could save us, but it's going to put us under an enormous amount of pressure. And the other part of it is that it's an interiors job, not an architecture one. And I don't think that we should necessarily go out and, get rid of a bunch of architects and hire a bunch of interiors people for one job. This is the Brisbane Interiors Office first job. We've got Farlap, the interiors director, that's running it, and obviously has a relationship that's won the job, but she's only got one assistant up there. So we're going to be dealing with challenges as well, like working across multiple locations, remote working or whatever, and also potentially people with the wrong skill set. And I think we need to look at our cost budget for this as well, because I imagine, we're going to be less effective here than we would ideally like to be. I think that's part of, if we're going to be doing redundancies, I think we need to be sort of, working out some sort of where people sit on the batting order. If we need to tap 4 people on the shoulder, we want to make sure we tap the right 4. I've seen it, in plenty of other places, that redundancies go around, voluntary redundancies, people got their hand up and all your good people leave. So it's a really, really, dynamic situation we find ourselves in. It's volatile. And I think the most critical piece of information I'd like is the latest entry in the CRM from the interiors director to say what's going on here. We met a month ago and this was at 50-50. Surely by now we know more. So until we actually get that feedback from the interiors director, we've got to look at worst case and best case.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, let's go back to the conversation we had last time at the last board meeting. I think we need to fast track those conversations with the teams about what is in the pipeline that we don't even know exists. It's not necessarily crystallized in their minds. We need to help them get to that. I'm conscious of their time though, because if they're doing overtime, they're not going to feel they have time for a workshop like that. So maybe it's about me spending time with a couple of them at a time. Big onus on me and my time, but I'm not doing all of that overtime that they're doing at the moment. So let's be a bit creative in the way we look at picking their brains.
This is where we find ourselves now. This is the $400,000 hole, and you can see, gaps below the budget line, everything there. If we bump that up to 100% and come back to the chart, you can see that we've now got a problem trying to get the work done on a weighted average basis. So, and if we take it out altogether, the worst case, there's sort of our 3 scenarios we've been just talking about. That's pretty grim. That's the 785.
So David, at the moment, it doesn't seem we have. It's not the moment that we can actually make a decision of redundancy because we actually don't have enough information.
No, we need to know what's happening with this interiors job. I don't think that there's anything more important now.
Yeah, and finding that out, because in the end we can't actually make a decision, a rational decision, until we have that information. But the problem has been raised is that the later we leave it, the more problematic it becomes, and the closer to Christmas we become, and the more sort of the decisions of actually laying people off a couple of weeks before Christmas rather than making a decision earlier, and obviously that reputational damage that creates, and obviously the staff issues that they do. So I mean, it's a conundrum that we've got at the moment, and the issue is how quickly can we get that information, and how quickly can we as a board meet together to sort of say, well, okay, this is the decision that we can make once we have full information.
I think that's it. I think when you've got good information, you can make good decisions.
I think one of the things that I also want to point out is we don't have to immediately jump to let's hire permanent full-time interior people. We can actually be a bit more creative around that. We can look at contractors, people who want to do some contracting to us, or subcontracting, whatever language you prefer. We can look at people, interested in some casual work, or part-time, or fixed term, or maximum term contracts. So there are different opportunities for us. Let's not just jump to putting people on, because we don't want to get into that cycle of we put too many people on, we are constantly making people redundant, because that impacts our culture and our reputation.
100%. Look, I'd like to make a point that this is only our second board meeting as part of this series, and in a way we're sort of looking at this as being a little bit of a crisis meeting. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? But I think that it's not a special project. I think being able to make these decisions, these are decisions happening all the time, every month to month to month. We've got to put ourselves in a position. So, from that HR perspective, we're talking to our people all the time, I imagine. That batting order we've got all the time. We're across our forecast. in this particular case, we're all hanging on the information from the Interiors Director. But I think as soon as we get that, everything else should be in place to make that decision.
Agreed.
Agreed.
All right. All right. Well, there's probably not much more we can do now until we haul the Interiors Director in here and start to unpack where we're at with cheap and nasty lawyers. Everyone loves a cheap and nasty lawyer, so let's hope we get it. As soon as we get some feedback, we'll come back to the audience and provide an update. So thanks very much for watching, everyone, and thanks, George. Thanks, Desley.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.